Looking back now, it's almost laughable how the small changes piled up and I didn't notice them at first. Megan and I used to be rock solid, or at least that's what I believed. We'd been together for years, weathered all the usual ups and downs, and I thought we were in this thing for the long haul. But then, right around the start of last year, things started to feel off. It all began when Megan reconnected with Ethan, this guy she knew from high school. At first, I wasn't concerned. We all have people from our past we keep in touch with, right? She'd mention him now and then. Oh, Ethan said this. Or Ethan had the funniest story. They talk about old memories, things from years ago, and I just assumed it was harmless. Honestly, it didn't even cross my mind to worry about it. But over time, that casual, nostalgic chatter began creeping into our lives in ways I couldn't ignore. Suddenly, Megan's glued to her phone all the time, laughing to herself like she's a teenager again. She'd glance at me with that look, the one that says, "I'm just chatting, don't worry about it." And every time I asked, "What's so funny?" she'd brush it off with a nothing or just Ethan being Ethan. I used to be her sounding board for everything, but now it felt like she was keeping something from me. And the worst part? She didn't even care that I noticed. Around this time, she started changing how she looked too. Megan had always been gorgeous to me, but suddenly, she was wearing makeup like she hadn't in years. She'd spend extra time getting ready in the mornings, like we were back in the early days of our relationship. One day, I even asked, "Who are you dressing up for?" She just laughed it off, saying, "Can't a woman feel good about herself?" But what really got me was when she started buying new clothes. Stuff that didn't look anything like her usual style. Bolder, tighter, just not the Megan I knew. And I couldn't say anything without sounding like a jealous idiot. So I kept quiet, even though it ate me up inside. A few weeks later, I figured I might be overthinking things. So, I suggested we have a night out with some friends, hoping it might help us reconnect. We met up with Samantha, one of Megan's old friends, and my buddies Dylan and Brandon. We grabbed a table, ordered drinks, and tried to pretend everything was normal. Samantha noticed right away. She raised an eyebrow and nudged Megan, teasing her. "Well, don't you look like someone ready to hit the dating scene again?" Megan laughed it off, but I saw how her face lit up, like she was enjoying every bit of attention. Dylan and Brandon exchanged glances, and I could practically feel their silent questions. Did I know what was going on? I had to force myself to laugh along, pretending it didn't bother me, though inside I was falling apart. Then, out of nowhere, Megan's phone chimed, and she was on it in an instant. She twisted her body away from the group, laughing quietly to herself as she typed. I didn't need to ask who it was, Ethan. When we got home later, I finally confronted her, asking, "So, what's going on with Ethan? Seems like you two are talking a lot." She just shrugged, barely glancing at me. "We're just catching up. Is that a problem?" The way she said it, as if I was the one in the wrong, only made me more frustrated. But I bit my tongue. "It's not a problem, Megan. I just don't get why you're being so distant lately." She rolled her eyes, muttering that I was being paranoid, and brushed past me on her way to the bedroom. I just stood there, in the hallway, feeling like I'd missed a turn on a road I thought I knew. Days passed, and I tried to put it out of my mind, but something kept gnawing at me. One night, I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, and she suddenly says she's going out for coffee. I almost choked. It was almost 10 p.m., and she's telling me she needs coffee? I asked if she was meeting someone, and she gave me that cold, dismissive look, saying, "Why do you care? I'll be back soon." Later, I found out it was Ethan she was meeting that night. She made it sound like it was no big deal, just coffee and catching up on the good old days. But every time she came home from seeing him, she walked through the door with this ridiculous grin on her face, looking like she just stepped out of some romance novel. Then, one night, I overheard her talking to him on the phone. She didn't know I was awake, but something made me get up. I saw her sneaking off with her phone, and I followed her, standing just outside the door. Her voice was soft, almost dreamy. She giggled, whispered something I couldn't hear, and in that moment, I knew what they had wasn't just catching up. There was this crackling energy between them, something I hadn't felt from her in a long time. It hit me. She was slipping away, lost in whatever fantasy they were living in, while I was left in the shadows, wondering how I ended up here. That night, I realized that everything we'd built together was probably over. I just didn't know yet how much worse it would get. Looking back now, I see all the signs. But when you're in the middle of it, when you're telling yourself that the woman you married would never betray you, it's easy to ignore the red flags. After that night, things just spiraled. She couldn't tear herself away from her phone. It was always right there, like some sacred object she couldn't let out of her sight. And whenever I got too close, she'd pull it away or slip it into her pocket. It was like she was building an invisible wall between us, one that got higher every day. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, maybe a midlife crisis. But deep down, I knew better. She was pulling away, and I was losing her. When I finally confronted Megan about everything, she hit me with this long-winded speech about needing time for herself. She said she wanted to explore new projects, and maybe attend a few business meetings here and there. Megan? Business meetings? That just didn't add up. I'd never known her to show any interest in anything like that. She'd always been perfectly happy in her own little world. Never the type to go after big plans or ambitions. So yeah, that excuse felt off, but I didn't call her out on it. I kept it to myself, watching her drift farther away with each passing day. Things at work started to change, too. Liz, a longtime colleague who'd known me for years, noticed I wasn't acting like myself. She'd make these comments like, "You don't seem like yourself, Nate," or "Everything okay at home?" One day, while we were grabbing coffee, she straight up asked, "Is Megan okay? I just have this feeling, like maybe something's wrong." I don't know, but when your spouse is acting distant, it's usually a sign. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't about to open up to Liz about my personal life, but her words stuck with me. It wasn't just me anymore. Other people were starting to notice how much this was weighing on me. Eventually, I couldn't keep it inside anymore, so I told Brandon, one of my closest friends. I filled him in on everything. How Megan had been acting so strangely, how she was always on her phone, how she was busy with these so-called projects. Brandon listened for a minute, then gave me that serious look he gets when he's thinking things through. Finally, he said, "Listen, Nate, I know a guy. Private investigator. Used him a few years ago, solid guy. If you want answers, he's your guy." Private investigator. I couldn't believe I was even considering it. But with each day that passed, with every excuse Megan gave me, I knew I had to do something. Still, I hesitated. Felt like a drastic step. But deep down, I knew that if I didn't do something soon, I'd be left in the dark while she carried on with whatever was happening. Then, one afternoon, I found a concert ticket in her purse. She was out, and I was just looking for some loose change when I saw it tucked in next to her wallet. I pulled it out, feeling my stomach twist. Megan had never cared about concerts. She always hated the noise and the crowds. And here it was, a ticket for a band that Ethan had mentioned liking to her. I put the ticket back, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and helplessness. She was planning to go to this concert with him. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just talking to Ethan. She was meeting him, spending time with him, sharing experiences that should have been mine to share with her. That night, things came to a head. She went to take a shower, and I finally did what I'd been putting off for weeks. I grabbed her phone. My heart was hammering in my chest, and my hands were trembling so bad I almost dropped it. I knew her password. She hadn't bothered to change it, probably thinking I'd never check. The first message I opened was from Ethan. It wasn't even subtle. They'd been reminiscing, sure, but it had gone way past that. They were making plans, places to meet, places they'd already been. I kept scrolling, finding messages I didn't want to see. Birthday wishes, inside jokes, and then the real bombshell. A picture of a necklace. He'd given it to her. Something small, delicate. A gift she'd never worn around me. I felt sick. It was like someone had punched me in the stomach. I could hardly breathe as I kept scrolling, seeing how they'd let this little reconnection spiral into something so much more. I could see it all so clearly now. The way she'd smile at her phone, the laughter she'd try to hide, the distance she kept between us. It was all because of him. When she came out of the shower, I shoved the phone back into its spot and tried to act like nothing had happened. But she must have seen something in my face because she gave me that look. The one that's a mix of curiosity and annoyance. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, like I was the one acting out of character. "Nothing," I muttered, forcing myself to sound casual. "Just a long day." I was boiling inside, but I didn't want to confront her yet. Not then. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. It felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, one step away from falling into a chaos that would change everything. And then the anniversary dinner came. Megan's parents were throwing this huge party, a celebration of love thing, inviting family, friends, basically anyone who had ever been part of their lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here they were, hosting a party to celebrate their perfect love, while their daughter was out there destroying mine behind my back. It was the perfect opportunity to make things right, or at least expose her for what she really was. By this point, I had my plan figured out. Confronting her in private wouldn't have the same impact. She'd just twist things around, play the victim, make me out to be the jealous husband. But in front of her family, friends, people who respected her parents and thought we were the perfect couple, that would hit her where it hurt the most. So, I gathered every shred of evidence I had, screenshots of her messages with Ethan, photos of them together, the concert ticket, the necklace. I saved it all on my phone, ready to show the world just who Megan really was. The night of the celebration, I played the part to perfection. We drove there in complete silence, Megan lost in her own world, while I kept my thoughts tightly contained, pretending to be just as enthusiastic for the evening as she was. When we arrived, her parents welcomed us with their usual warmth. Big smiles, tight hugs, totally oblivious. The house was packed with relatives and family friends, cousins, aunts, uncles, all gathered around the buffet, laughing and mingling, pouring drinks. Megan's sister, Alyssa, came over to give her a quick hug and shot me a look full of curiosity. Alyssa and I had always had a quiet understanding, a mutual awareness of Megan's flaws. Megan was, well, Megan. I kept my distance from her all night, watching her weave through the crowd like she owned the room. She was the same Megan as always, laughing, smiling, charming everyone with that perfect mask she'd perfected over the years. But I wasn't the only one who sensed something was wrong. At one point, Alyssa found me alone in the kitchen, and she didn't waste time. "Okay, what's going on with you two?" she asked, her voice low but laced with concern. "You look like you're here for a funeral, not a party." I gave her a hollow smile, the weight of everything crushing me. "Let's just say, it's going to be a night to remember, Alyssa. You'll see what I mean." She raised an eyebrow, clearly confused, but nodded and went back to join the others. After dinner, when the dessert came out, the room hummed with warmth and laughter. Megan's parents were seated at the head of the table, exchanging loving glances, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I stood up, cleared my throat, and raised my glass to make a toast. "First off," I began, my voice steady, "I want to thank Gregory and Susan for showing us all what true love and commitment really look like. You two have set a standard for the rest of us, and we're lucky to have such an example." Glasses clinked, everyone nodding along. Megan, sitting across from me, had that glow on her face, the one that said she thought this was going to be another typical speech about love and loyalty. She was in for a rude awakening. "So," I continued, letting the silence stretch, "in honor of loyalty, trust, and the promises we make to each other, I think it's time we talk about what those words actually mean." My eyes locked on Megan's. She shifted in her seat, that nervous smile trying to hold steady, but I could see the unease creeping in. She knew something was coming but had no idea just how bad it was going to be. "See," I went on, my voice dropping slightly, "trust is delicate, and when you find out that trust has been shattered, especially by the person you believed in most, it's a blow you don't recover from easily." The room went dead silent. I felt all eyes on me, some people looking confused, others starting to realize what was happening. Megan's smile faltered. "Nate, what are you talking about?" She tried to laugh it off, but there was a tremor in her voice now. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it slowly, and held it up for everyone to see. I think it's only fair that everyone knows who you really are, Megan. I opened up her messages, scrolling through her and Ethan's conversations, and let the evidence speak for itself. The room, once warm and filled with celebration, turned cold instantly. A few people gasped. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, her father's face drained of all color, and Megan just sat there, paralyzed, unable to process the unfolding nightmare. I kept scrolling, showing them the photos, her meeting up with Ethan, the pictures of the jewelry, the concert ticket. All of it, proof of her betrayal, laid bare for everyone to see. The silence was broken by Alyssa's voice, sharp and almost gleeful. Megan, is this true? Her words cut through the tension like a knife. There was something oddly satisfying in her tone, like she'd been waiting for this moment, enjoying the destruction of her sister's perfect little life. Megan tried to backpedal, mumbling that it wasn't what it looked like, that they were just old friends reconnecting. But the evidence was too much to deny. Everyone knew. Megan's parents were stunned, speechless, their faces a mix of disbelief and hurt. And then Alyssa couldn't resist. Guess all that time you spent making sure your life looked perfect finally paid off? Huh, Megan? Her words were a slap in the face. Megan tried to respond, but it was too late. Everyone in that room now knew the truth about her. Her cousin John, always ready with a cutting remark, added his own. We always knew you were full of yourself, Megan. But this? With a married man? Your parents must be so proud. I saw Megan shrink in on herself, but there was no escape. The whole room had turned on her, and there was nowhere to hide. At that point, she couldn't take it anymore. She stood up, stormed out of the room, and slammed the door behind her. I watched her go, feeling a strange kind of satisfaction welling up inside me. The truth had come out, and now she had to face it on her own. I didn't follow her. She had made her choices, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. I stuck around a little longer, talking to some people who came up to me, some offering apologies, others quietly offering support. It was surreal, like I was standing at the crossroads of two lives, the one I'd been living, and the one I was about to begin. As I left, I took one last look around the room, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Megan's little world had fallen apart, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. After that night, everything changed. The news of Megan's affair spread like wildfire. Friends, family, even her coworkers, everyone knew. It wasn't just gossip anymore. People started avoiding her. I didn't think it would hit her that hard, but watching her reputation crumble was brutal. She'd spent years building this image of herself, professional, trustworthy, the perfect woman. Now it was all falling apart piece by piece. Within a week, I started hearing from people who knew both of us, friends we'd shared for years, wanting to show me they were on my side. Samantha and Brandon, two of Megan's closest friends, began pulling away from her. Brandon, especially, was outspoken, saying he couldn't respect someone who'd destroy their marriage like she did. Dylan, another mutual friend, made a public comment about infidelity, emphasizing how it went against everything he stood for. Megan knew all of this. Every time someone distanced themselves from her, it was like another punch to the gut. It wasn't just her personal life that was spiraling. Megan's clients started dropping her too. These were people who'd once trusted her, who valued her work, but now they couldn't look at her the same way. Some flat out refused to work with her. She tried to explain it away once, telling me things just aren't the same in her line of work, but I didn't need her to justify it. I knew exactly what it was, the fallout from the scandal. She tried to find new clients, new business partners, but trust wasn't something people were willing to give her anymore. The whole mess left her in a financial bind. She'd built her career on those clients, those relationships, and now they were all slipping through her fingers. I'd see her trying to hold it together, her smile wavering, the worry etched deeper into her face. But honestly, I couldn't bring myself to care. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. Then, something I didn't expect started happening. Alyssa. After everything went down at the anniversary dinner, Alyssa reached out to check on me. I'd known her for years, but this felt different. She'd seen everything unfold with Megan and Ethan, and there was something in the way she spoke to me. It was warm. She understood the pain I was going through, and that was something I hadn't realized I needed until she offered it. We started talking more. She'd send texts just to check in or stop by under some pretense, but really it was just to talk. I'd never seen her this way before, but there was a side to her that I hadn't noticed. Empathetic, supportive, and for the first time in ages, I felt like someone actually cared about me. One evening, she suggested we grab dinner. She said it was just to talk, and I didn't think much of it. After all, she was Megan's sister, so I figured it was about family solidarity more than anything else. But when we sat down, there was an ease between us that felt different from anything I'd experienced with Megan in years. Over dinner, I let it all out. My humiliation, the anger, the emptiness Megan had left behind. Alyssa just listened, never interrupting, her gaze steady and understanding. At one point, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, saying, "You deserve so much better, Nate. You really do." There was something in her voice, something real and comforting, and I realized, in that moment, I hadn't felt cared for like that in a long time. After that night, we started seeing each other more often. At first, I didn't expect it to go anywhere, but the more time we spent together, the more I couldn't ignore how I felt when I was with her. She made me feel wanted, needed, in a way Megan never had. Alyssa understood me, respected me, and that connection became something I couldn't resist. Slowly, those dinners turned into something more. We tried to keep it casual, to maintain the just friends front. But there was this undeniable chemistry between us. One night, after dinner and a few too many drinks, we crossed that line. It wasn't just about getting back at Megan, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a part of it. No, this was something real, something I needed. Alyssa and I didn't need to talk about it, it just felt right. Of course, we weren't the only ones who noticed what was happening. When the family found out, all hell broke loose. Megan and Alyssa's parents were furious. Her mom cornered Alyssa at a family event, hissing accusations, saying she'd betrayed her sister, torn apart the family bond. Alyssa tried to explain that Megan was the one who had destroyed our lives first, that I needed someone, and that she was just trying to help me heal. But their mother wasn't having any of it. To her, it was unforgivable. Naturally, things only got worse between Megan and the rest of the family. Cousin John, who had already been disgusted by Megan's betrayal, sided with Alyssa, saying Megan had brought all this upon herself. Alyssa and I quickly became the talk of the family. What had started as a personal betrayal became a full-blown family scandal. People started talking, and Megan's support dwindled. The irony wasn't lost on me. She tried to destroy our marriage, and now her actions were tearing apart her family, too. At first, I questioned what I was doing with Alyssa. I wondered if I was being too impulsive or even vindictive. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Alyssa wasn't just a rebound. She was exactly what I needed. She understood me, understood the betrayal, and wanted to help me pick up the pieces. Slowly, being with her stopped feeling like a reaction to Megan's actions and started feeling like a real choice, one I was making for myself. Meanwhile, Megan was left to deal with the aftermath of her actions. She tried to reach out to her old friends, tried to explain herself, maybe even spin the story to make herself look like the victim. But no one was buying it. They had seen the evidence, heard the stories, and they weren't about to forget anytime soon. After the dust settled from Megan's public humiliation, the inevitable was staring me down. Divorce. I was ready to put this nightmare behind me, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her walk away with more than she deserved. Luckily, I had Jordan in my corner. We'd known each other for years, and if there was one thing I could count on, it was Jordan's determination. He wasn't just a good lawyer. He was the kind of guy you brought in when you needed someone to rip through the opposition with a smile on their face. If anyone could help me get a clean break from Megan, it was him. We met up over drinks, and I laid out everything, the texts with Ethan, the mess at the anniversary dinner, all of it. Jordan didn't flinch. He just nodded along, jotting down notes as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Nate, we've got her. She's left a trail of evidence a mile long. With all this, we can make sure she gets as little as possible. Jordan had a solid plan. We were going to present her affair as a severe breach of trust, a violation of our marriage that would give us leverage to fight for my assets. I had my business to protect, too, and Jordan knew exactly how to handle it. Every angle, every argument we could use, he had it covered. The way he laid it all out, I knew he was taking this seriously. Finally, it felt like I was going to get some justice. But Megan wasn't going to give up that easily. She started scrambling, trying to find someone who'd take her side and paint me as the villain. But most of her friends had turned their backs on her by now. In the end, she reached out to her younger sister, Isla. They'd always been close, although Isla had largely stayed out of the mess between Megan and me. But, in the end, family loyalty seemed to run deep, and Isla was willing to go all in to help her sister fight back. Isla pushed Megan to find an attorney who'd go after everything we had. My assets, the business, anything she could get her hands on. When I found out, I almost had to give her credit for her persistence. But in the end, they were no match for Jordan. Every argument they tried to make, Jordan shot down with cold, hard evidence. He pulled out the texts, the photos, and laid out the details of every secret meeting Megan had with Ethan. Her lawyer tried to spin the narrative that I was bitter and out for revenge, but Jordan shut him down every time. In court, Megan's case crumbled, and there was nothing they could do to salvage it. The final ruling was a total win for me. Megan was left with almost nothing. She lost her rights to the house, the car, and any joint investments we'd made. I walked away with the business and a clean break from her, free from any financial obligations moving forward. The judge saw her affair as a significant betrayal, just as Jordan had predicted, and Megan was left empty-handed. Watching her face when that ruling came down, I saw a flash of panic. For the first time, I think she realized she was falling fast, and there was no one left to catch her. Reality hit her hard. She had to move out of our home, sell off her things just to stay afloat, and find cheaper living arrangements. Her reputation was already in tatters thanks to the scandal, and with clients dropping her left and right, her financial future looked bleak. She tried to find new work, to salvage whatever she could, but the truth was out. Her name was now tied to a story that no one wanted to touch. Former clients stopped trusting her, and word spread quickly. She was radioactive, and I could see it was eating her alive. Desperate, she even turned to Ethan, hoping he could be her saving grace. The irony wasn't lost on me. The guy she'd destroyed our marriage for was now her last hope. But as luck would have it, Ethan didn't want anything to do with her either. When she reached out, asking for help, he apparently told her, "I didn't sign up for this mess." He cut her off, leaving her to handle the wreckage on her own. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. She'd burned everything we had for him, and now he was nowhere to be found. Without friends, without her lover, and even with her own family pulling back, Megan was cornered. The only person left standing by her was Isla, but even she started to withdraw. Isla had her own life to live, and Megan's drama was starting to drag her down, too. Every now and then, I'd hear from mutual acquaintances about Megan struggling to make ends meet, clinging to the last remnants of her dignity, trying to salvage whatever she could. As for me, the divorce was the final chapter. I was done. The mess Megan had created was hers to clean up, and I walked away with a sense of relief and closure. It wasn't just about the financial win or seeing her lose it all. It was about finally breaking free. She was left with the consequences of her choices, and I was free to move forward with my life. After the divorce, something changed in me. It was like I could finally take a deep breath again, no longer weighed down by the wreckage of our marriage. I threw myself into my work, focused on my business, and without the constant strain of Megan's chaos holding me back, everything started to fall into place. Projects I'd put off for months, clients I hadn't had time for, they all became my focus. Slowly but surely, my business began to thrive. I started getting out more, connecting with other entrepreneurs, attending events, and building the kind of relationships I'd neglected during my marriage. At one of these events, I met Natalie. She was impossible to ignore. There was this undeniable energy about her, A clear sense that she knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. We hit it off immediately, talking shop, exchanging ideas, and before long we were discussing potential partnerships. Her drive was magnetic, and I could tell she was someone who focused on the bigger picture, never bogged down by petty distractions. Working with her felt like a breath of fresh air. Meanwhile, my relationship with Alyssa started to fade. In the beginning, it had felt real. At least it seemed that way, but with time I realized it was more about both of us trying to make sense of the mess Megan had left behind. There had been comfort in that shared pain. But as the months went by, it became obvious our connection had run its course. We ended things amicably, deciding to stay friends. Alyssa got what she needed too. Maybe a chance to prove herself after spending so many years in Megan's shadow. But deep down, we both knew it was time to move forward. With the divorce finalized and my life slowly getting back on track, I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen much of during my marriage. Samantha invited me to a few social gatherings, and Dylan and Brandon were there, reminding me of the life I'd had before everything fell apart. It felt good to be around people who knew the real me, and little by little, I began to feel open to the idea of meeting someone new. That's when Natalie and I started seeing each other outside of work. She was different, confident, sharp, and had this unique way of seeing things that was completely refreshing. One night, after a business dinner, we ended up talking for hours. We discovered we had more in common than I'd thought. We shared stories, laughed, and somehow, the night turned into something more. What had started as a business relationship was now blossoming into something real. Something I hadn't expected, but something I was more than happy to welcome. Meanwhile, Megan was facing the consequences of her choices. Her life had unraveled since the divorce. Without a steady income or the support she once had, she was forced into low-cost housing, scrambling to find whatever work she could to get by. She tried to rebuild, but her reputation was in tatters. The scandal still haunted her, and people weren't quick to forget. Old friends had moved on, clients had stopped trusting her, and she was left to pick up the pieces on her own. The only person still in touch with her was Isla, though even she was pulling away. Isla had her own career to focus on, and Megan's mess was becoming a weight she couldn't carry. Megan was left with nothing but the weight of her regrets. She had made her choices, and now she was stuck with the consequences. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing she was finally facing reality, the reality she tried so hard to escape by destroying our marriage. As for me, life had found a new rhythm. My business with Natalie was thriving, expanding faster than I'd ever imagined. It brought me both financial stability and a sense of purpose. I felt like I was finally back on track, finally at peace. Natalie and I grew closer, and being with her made me realize just how much I'd let slide during my marriage to Megan. With Natalie, I had a partner in every sense of the word. She respected me, shared my drive, and was there for me without any hidden agendas. Looking back on everything, I could see how much I'd grown from the experience. Megan's betrayal had been painful, but it had forced me to see what I truly wanted and deserved. It taught me strength, helped me appreciate the people who truly had my back. I'd left the worst behind, and now I was ready to build a life that was honest, fulfilling, and free from the shadows of my past. In the end, I had to admit that Megan's betrayal had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It pushed me to redefine my life, to find the people who genuinely cared, and to finally move forward. I had a future I was excited about, and for the first time in years, I was ready to embrace it.